Next up, we have Emily R. Pellerin. So keep it going.
Hi, my name is Emily Ray Pellerin. Before I begin, I feel I have a responsibility to admit that it's difficult for me to present my research so publicly today, because the stories that have graciously been shared with me, that I've researched and that I've written about, they're not my own. And I'm speaking them to a room full of people whose stories, like mine, likely don't converge with them. That said, I ask that we enter into this with a shared humility as I speak about this delicate subject matter through design, because I do believe it is important. My thesis is about clothing in prisons and jails. It's about how these tangible items which make up the uniform affect people. It's about how they relate to larger power systems, ranging from the system of the penal institution to social or interpersonal power systems to individualized systems or ways of being. And with these three tiers of power as the framework for examining who owns agency in this setting, I look specifically at clothing as a mechanism for the exercise of power over people. I asked, how are the penal system's articles of clothing, which are designed to neuter identity, circumvented or subverted through sartorial or clothing-related self-design? I quickly want to acknowledge the particularity of the prison or jail setting in regard to how power operates within its own system, between people, and on things, like clothing. Sanctions, quotas, pat-downs, searches, punishments, and citations all contribute to the intensely surveilled and disciplined way that incarcerated citizens are allowed to relate to their clothing in formation of identity. So in the name of design, I'll use an object of sartorial culture to briefly exemplify these power operations: footwear. Footwear is a highly surveilled, designed object, that is, an object created for utility, whose impacts on its end user are significant. But in a prison or jail setting, shoes are not made with their end user in mind. These, the Unifoot PVC sandals, are advertised in the 2019 Bob Barker catalog, and to note, there's no relation to the game show host. Bob Barker is the nation's largest supplier of materials to detention centers, and that includes clothing, disciplinary equipment, culinary, recreational, sanitary supplies, and more. But again, Bob Barker's purchaser is not its end user. They sell to corrections facility employees and bureaucrats like inventory control managers or superintendents. But the end user, of course, is the incarcerated individual, whose feet will have to fit into these one-size-fits-all shoes. Here is a clear articulation of how the institution's sartorial power affects the clothing-individual relationship. These are the patakis, a different shoe, and a style more widely used. They were nicknamed by incarcerated citizens for the governor of New York, who was in office at the time they were introduced, George Pataki, who reportedly was flattered by the nickname. In other states and across other facilities, they or similar slip-on style footwear have different names. For example, the ninja shoe in California. These are made of thin canvas. They're black and they slip on with 3 securing straps. One woman I met with, Camilla, referred to these as cardboard with Velcro on top. Another guy I had the pleasure of interviewing, Cliff, shared that underneath the Pataki's 3 Velcro straps are colors, sometimes orange, sometimes blue, sometimes red. Some people will peel the canvas away from the strap to expose the color underneath, leaving a pop of brightness. But for some incarcerated gang members, this color crapshoot becomes a little more dire of a situation. On Rikers Island, for example, as Cliff shared with me, where almost no color is allowed to be introduced to the uniform, it's a grave lottery for Crips, who want the blue color, or for Bloods, who want red. The golden ticket of sartorially spoken affiliation, an instance in which interpersonal structures, gang membership in this case, exhibit power through clothing. These are Camilla's Pumas, which she was able to decorate with art supplies. The white and black Pumas are not offered by the jail she was in, but they are included on a strict list of allowed footwear. Camilla's parents had to buy these for her, and she acknowledges that she was lucky to have someone to do that for her. She ranks the white shoes even higher than the black Pumas because the black ones can be mistaken for Patakis from far away. And these dirty faster, so if you get newer ones that are cleaner, people notice. In essence, they symbolize still being cared for from the outside. And these, as you can see, Camilla has personalized. She's made them artsy. She's made them very hers. These shoes represent how an incarcerated citizen may have the opportunity to display their own individuality on and through their clothing, negotiating against the power structures of the institution. So in conclusion, footwear is social capital because of the value or the non-value of its brand name, which is to be expected, but also because, particular to this setting, of its representation of connections on the inside and to the outside. Footwear is personal capital as well, because it is one of the clothing objects in prisons and jails that is allowed to be imported in or bought and shipped to you. It breaks the pattern of uniformity, allowing a little of your outside self in, a little of your outside decision-making, your outside style, averting sartorial disciplinary control through symbolic and literal ownership. And I'd like to close with two brief stories. The first is from George Tommy, who works with horses and was involved in an equine rehabilitation program when he was incarcerated in Nevada. This is a still from a movie he was in that was based on that program. He got to wear special boots to work with the horses, but other than that, he kept his dress pretty simple, pretty compliant. He shared with me that the prison uniform worked for him. He says, "You didn't have that much to work with about the clothing he had access to in prison," citing this as a good thing, because he wasn't lost in sartorial indecision. He wanted to think about his life, his decisions, and his character. The uniform was effective for him, enabling him to explore his identity because of its constancy. He engaged in penitence, he rehabilitated. The system, through its clothing, worked for George Tommy. The majority of the formerly incarcerated individuals I spoke with throughout my research process did not share this experience. The uniform as an object of disciplinary power is traumatic for a lot of people. I'll end with a story of a friend who really inspires me in the way he addressed his circumstance of sartorial restraint. The story of how he related to clothing in prison is a unique one in that it acknowledges trauma, but it also acknowledges empowerment. Lamont is an artist, and when incarcerated, he used to paint his uniform with polka dots or with lots of color. He attributed his evasion of punishment for this design to his otherwise solid behavior, and he loved being different from everyone else. He appreciated the attention it brought to him, the way he was able to forge special relationship with the corrections officers, a mutual sort of limits-pushing, inoffensive class clown respect. His self-design, though, was ultimately about safety. The safety of recognition and the safety of de-affiliation with troublemakers, and it was about a legacy. "Remember me," his uniform said. "The guy with the polka dots. Remember me. The artsy guy, the pacifist, the colorist." Lamont did not and does not dress ostentatiously on the outside, but on the inside, his sartorial performance was recuperative. It was an exercise that felt necessary to his aliveness. "I didn't want to die out in spirit," he told me. "I didn't want to get bitter in spirit." Clothing is a solemn agent in the way we architect the American penal experience. Clothing is a site for negotiation between people, other people, and the institution. And the space and freedom for style as an articulator of self has the unique chance to resuscitate identity in the context of incarceration. No one wants to die out in spirit. Thank you.